Hello everyone, and welcome to the second chapter of how to build in Minecraft with Rusty. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about texture. So what is texture? Well, texture is basically, in Minecraft, when you have something that looks like depth, but it's on a single block. So in depth, basically, depth is the amount of layers that you have in a build. And the more depth you have in a build, within reason, obviously, the better it looks. So this right here looks like there's scratchiness to it, like something sort of clawed across it. You can almost feel the texture. This one's more bumpy feeling, and this one feels more man-made. So there's got all these little circles and different things. Now what's interesting about this is that this is a flat block. It's a 16 by 16 texture in this case. So there's no actual real depth. But our mind is creating that depth. So I'm going to show you guys a picture of a painting that I created now. So in this picture, what we're looking at is several layers of depth. By the way, this is a picture that I made after a Bob Ross painting tutorial that I will put in the description if you are interested. So what we have way off in the background is a mountain that's just a silhouette. Now, if I told you or didn't tell you that that was a mountain, you're already able to know that's a mountain because you're given context. We have the sky, and then we've got the land area, and then we've also got other mountains. So your mind quickly goes to the front of the mountain and then sees that there are other mountains in the back. And then there are more mountains that are so far back that it's just a silhouette. But really, at the end of the day, all this picture represents is how our mind perceives things. It's just paint on a canvas. It's not a real mountain. Those aren't real trees. But because of the way they were put together, our mind interprets them as those things because of the information that we're given. So when you have a block like this, you are no longer looking at this and going, okay, this is just a bunch of random pixels. Like if we went like this is just a bunch of random pixels. But now, the further away we get to a certain point, the more we're able to understand the context of what is going on here. So this is a cobblestone block. We see the little circle pieces. This is a tuft block. But really, in the end of the day, what we're looking at here is we see the different texture, the darker spots, and then the lighter spots are sort of popping out rather than being sunk in. So if you want to think about it this way, these are just positions on a 16 by 16 array where the computer has said this color is this color is this, and this color is this. It's just numbers on a script that the computer is running. When in reality, our eyes are looking at this and it's saying this is a brick. So to illustrate how important textures can be, I wanted to come into this area. So here we have everything is basically the same. And we've got light bouncing off the walls, and it's basically telling us, okay, this is a white room and there's not really much to it. But then when we come over here, all of a sudden, we get a little bit of context. But I want to show you what happens when we start putting in a little bit of texture. All of a sudden, we get a different feel and a different vibe. You see how that changed? Just by putting in a bunch of textures, very similar color, but now this has a texture in it. So all of a sudden, we don't feel like we're in a white blank room in the middle of nowhere, some sort of liminal space somewhere in a back room. We've got a little bit of texture going on here, and it tells us a little extra. But you see how textures create a story in your build. Okay, so let's go back to our first build here. We have this wooden structure. It's got a texture to it, so we do have a little bit of a story here. But we're using two separate textures, and of course, like we discussed before, it doesn't really have a color scheme. It's the same color. So right now we've got a little bit of a story. Everything is this wooden texture. And so the story is kind of bland. There's really not much extra to it. But when we come over here, all of a sudden we get a little bit extra of a story. We know that these are stripped logs, and we know that this is cobble. So we sort of have an idea that this is a foundation of the building. And these logs help us understand that there's actual structure to it. Later on, when we get to roof designs and different things, we'll be putting logs across it and all sorts of stuff. You can see that in my building series if you're interested. But it gives us that extra context. Then when we open it up, we have on the ceiling, we've got this regular oak plank in the bottom, regular oak plank. So that kind of, adds to the story, adds a little bit different of a texture, and kind of gives us the idea that this is, what was sort of used for the flooring and what's being used as the ceiling. So we're able to distinguish all of the different pieces from each other: foundation, walls, ceiling, floor. So if we add in tuft, we've got 3 different pieces of interest going on in the build. These are 3 different blocks that are telling 3 different stories as to why they were put there. Now, our mind isn't really going to go through all of the stories. It's not like it's a narrative per se. But basically what you're saying when you're using different blocks, when you're using different pieces here and here is, well, maybe there was at one point a log here, but the log got damaged and they decided to put in some planks instead to repair it. Basically, we're varying up textures in the build in order to sort of tell a mini story about the building. Maybe all of these blocks used to be andesite, and then they started to get cracked. And that's what made the cobblestone. Okay, so we have 3 textures here. And one interesting thing about all of these textures is they're not trees. Right? We can agree on that? They're not trees. We know that because in the game it says ancient debris, polished basalt, and regular basalt. So they're not trees. Or are they? We can imagine that this is a tree because of the textures that are given to us. This one's a little bit more difficult because of how polished it is, but there are some maple trees that are gray and have this matte finish to it. So our mind can imagine that it's a tree. So yeah, we've got different things that we can do, and it's very easy to see how cobblestone can't necessarily pass as a tree, even in this very horrible form of a tree. But these other trees, these other blocks that are stone, can pass off as a tree because of the texture. It's all about telling our mind a story, and if it's a believable enough story, our mind will accept it. So that's the basics of textures. Again, textures are going to be what tells mini stories throughout your build. And as you get to a more in-depth build like we have here, you're going to start to understand how important textures can be in really changing the story of how things look. So this week, for an exercise, what you can do is you can go into your creative world, which you should all make, and play around with just building in different textures. So this is an example of using a texture that is a little bit odd. I used this here to kind of look like some sort of wallpaper that's being used in this house. And it just is an example of how you can use very strange things for different textures to tell different stories. So don't be afraid to get creative, and don't be afraid to go in and try different things. That's one of my main goals in this series, is to help you be creative and help you figure things out on your own so that you can go off and make amazing builds in the world. So yeah, this week, take some textures, play around with it, really enjoy yourself, and if you guys want, you can send photos and pictures and different things of what you do over to me on email or my Twitter. Links will be in the description to both of those. And yeah, just send me what you guys build, what you want to share with me, even if it's not pertaining to the lesson, and even if it's 5-10 years in the future. Send them over, and if I have time to be able to respond, I will. But otherwise, I'll at least try and give you some sort of a quick like or something to encourage you to keep on trucking and keep on building. Next week, we're going to be talking about depth, so I hope you guys are excited for that and will join me in the next episode. Make sure to leave comments and feedback in the description below. Last week, you guys did an amazing job letting me know what you guys' thoughts were on this series, so really excited to keep moving this forward. I've got 6 sections planned out for this and more chapters that I'm adding every single day as I think about different elements of building and how to condense it down into these really fine-tuned 10-minute videos. So as we keep tracking, keep on giving me that feedback. It really helps a lot. But until next time, guys, happy mining and crafting.